It looked like something from the future, a radical swept-wing jet meant to give the US Navy an edge in the Cold War. It didn't look like anything that had ever taken off from an aircraft carrier before. With its semi-tailless design and long, stilt-like nose gear, some pilots thought it looked like a praying mantis. But for all its futuristic promise, it would earn a string of grim, unforgiving nicknames. The crews who struggled to keep it flying called it the gutless Cutlass. The young pilots who had to strap into its cockpit knew it by a far more sinister name, the Ensign Eliminator. This is the story of the Vought F7U Cutlass, a jet so ambitious and so deeply flawed that it became a death trap. During its short, catastrophic career, over a quarter of all Cutlasses ever built were destroyed in accidents. It racked up the highest accident rate of any swept-wing fighter in the US Navy, taking the lives of 4 test pilots and 21 naval aviators. It was an aircraft that pushed the boundaries of aviation technology, but was ultimately betrayed by the very systems meant to make it revolutionary. This is the most dangerous jet the US Navy has ever flown. In the years just after World War II, the world was stepping into a new and very dangerous era. The dawn of the jet age and the start of the Cold War threw a massive challenge at the US Navy. Its fleet of propeller-driven fighters, heroes of the Pacific War, was quickly becoming obsolete. The urgent need for a high-performance carrier-based jet wasn't just a priority, it was a matter of national security. Soviet designers were rolling out their own advanced jet fighters, and the US had to keep pace or risk losing control of the skies. In June 1945, the Navy laid out a tough set of requirements for a new day fighter. It had to break 600 miles per hour, soar to 40,000 feet, and, the hardest part, operate from the brutal, unforgiving deck of an aircraft carrier. The jet age was here, and the Navy desperately needed an interceptor that could counter the new generation of Soviet bombers and fighters. The challenge was huge. Build a machine that had the blistering speed of a land-based jet, but could also handle the unique, demanding world of naval aviation, savage catapult launches, and violent arrested landings. Several companies threw their hats in the ring, but one design stood out as truly revolutionary. The winning design came from Chance Vought, the same company that had built the legendary F4U Corsair of World War II. The lead designer was Rex Beisel, a man famous for innovative, if unconventional, aircraft. His submission was unlike anything the Navy had ever seen. It was a tailless design, with broad, sharply swept wings and vertical fins mounted at the tips. The cockpit was shoved way out front, which gave the pilot great visibility, but also perched him 14 feet in the air on a complex, stilt-like nose gear. It was a breathtaking list of technological firsts for a production naval aircraft. The first with swept wings, the first designed from the ground up with afterburners, the first with a fully hydraulic, artificial feel control system, and America's first ever tailless production fighter. While Vought publicly denied it at the time, the design was clearly shaped by late-war German aerodynamic research, including data associated with Arado jet bomber design. This research explored configurations that had seen little real-world testing, especially in the demanding environment of carrier aviation. On paper, the Cutlass promised exceptional performance and a versatile weapons load, including bombs, rockets, and eventually guided missiles. In practice, those promises would prove far easier to write into specifications than to realize in metal. The first prototype, the XF7U1, took to the skies on September 29, 1948. It was immediately obvious that Vought's vision was in serious trouble. The single biggest flaw, one that would plague the jet its entire life, was its engines. The Westinghouse J-34 turbojets were tragically underpowered, producing a tiny fraction of the thrust needed for such a heavy and advanced airframe. Pilots quickly found out the plane was sluggish, unstable, and prone to unpredictable, wicked shimmies, a pilot term for violent, uncontrolled oscillations near a stall or post-stall gyrations. The test program was a sign of things to come. All three of the initial prototypes were lost in crashes. But even with these catastrophic failures, the Navy was desperate. The Korean War was raging, and the pressure to field a high-performance fighter was immense. Navy officials, and even some politicians, pushed for the program to continue. The first production models, the F7U-1, were so riddled with problems that they were declared totally unfit for combat service and were used only for training and trials. The version that was supposed to fix everything was the F7U-3, which first flew in December 1951. It was bigger and had more powerful, but still deeply unreliable, Westinghouse J46 engines. This was the version that would reach the fleet, and this was the version that would seal the Cutlass's deadly reputation. As test pilot and future astronaut Wally Schirra would later write, the Cutlass was an accident looking for a place to happen, a widowmaker. When the F7U-3 finally entered service in 1954, its long list of flaws became terrifyingly clear to the pilots and crews. This plane wasn't just difficult to fly, it felt like it was actively trying to kill you. The most infamous issue was still the engines. Westinghouse had promised engines that would produce 10,000 pounds of thrust, but the J46s that were delivered could barely manage 6,000 pounds with the afterburner lit. This earned the jet its "gutless Cutlass" nickname. The engines were painfully slow to respond to the throttle, a fatal problem for a carrier jet, where split-second power changes can mean the difference between life and death. What's even worse, they had a terrifying habit of flaming out and shutting down completely if you flew through rain. Making the engine problems even deadlier was an equally treacherous hydraulic system. The Cutlass was one of the first jets to use a high-pressure, 3,000 psi all-hydraulic system to move its flight controls. It was prone to leaks and could fail without warning, leaving the pilot in a plane they couldn't control. That long, fragile nose gear was also part of this system, and it was famous for collapsing during hard carrier landings. Maintenance crews said the gear doors would sometimes just fall off the plane for no reason. These flaws made the most dangerous part of any naval flight, landing on a carrier, a terrifying gamble. To land, the Cutlass had to fly with its nose pointed so high up that the pilot couldn't even see the flight deck. They were flying blind, relying completely on the landing signal officer to guide them down. If they got too low, the underpowered engines couldn't spool up fast enough to save them, often leading to a ramp strike. This storm of bad visibility, weak engines, and unreliable systems is what earned the Cutlass its Ensign Eliminator title, as young, inexperienced pilots were tragically unprepared for its vicious nature. The danger wasn't just talk. In one bizarre incident on July 26, 1954, Lieutenant Floyd Nugent's Cutlass suffered a sudden loss of control, likely caused by a hydraulic failure. Forced to eject, Nugent could only watch as his now pilotless jet, still carrying live rockets, stabilized itself and continued flying on. For nearly 30 minutes, the unmanned Cutlass circled the skies near San Diego before finally running out of fuel and crashing into the ocean just offshore. Even the Navy's elite demonstration team, the Blue Angels, couldn't tame the Cutlass. In 1953, the team got two F7U-1s to fly as solo acts. The experiment was a disaster. The jets were a mechanical nightmare, and their glitchy flight controls made them too dangerous for formation flying. During one airshow, pieces of the landing gear doors fell off and scattered across a spectator grandstand, miraculously injuring no one. In another famous incident, celebrated test pilot and Blue Angel Edward Whitey Feitner suffered a complete hydraulic failure on takeoff. He managed to wrestle the burning jet through a row of trees and back onto the runway, a feat of incredible skill. The two jets were quickly deemed unsuitable for demonstration flying. Frontline squadrons suffered even more. The carrier USS Hancock became a floating stage for the Cutlass's horrors in the summer of 1955, as squadrons struggled to operate the jet under real combat deck conditions. On July 14th, Lieutenant Commander J.T. Alkire, a squadron executive officer and one of the unit's most experienced pilots, was on his final approach. A slight misjudgment or sink rate should have been recoverable, but with not enough thrust available and engines slow to respond, there was no margin left. His Cutlass struck the aft portion of the flight deck and exploded in a fireball, killing Al-Khair and 3 deck crewmen instantly. Just a few months later, on that same carrier, the aircraft claimed another life. Lieutenant George Millard's Cutlass missed the arresting wires during landing and slammed into the deck barrier. The impact caused the notoriously fragile nose gear to collapse, driving it up through the cockpit floor. The violent shock triggered Millard's ejection seat, firing him directly into another aircraft parked on deck and killing him instantly. After that, the captain of the Hancock had seen enough. The Cutlass was removed from further flight operations aboard the ship. You'd think the mounting death toll would have been enough for command to shut the program down, but the Navy instead pushed forward, eventually equipping 13 squadrons with the Cutlass. In practice, its operational career was defined less by combat readiness and more by constant troubleshooting. Many units struggled to keep even a handful of aircraft flight-worthy at any given time, as maintenance demands far exceeded those of other carrier jets. Faced with high accident rates and unreliable performance at sea, some squadron commanders quietly limited the Cutlass's use, or refused to deploy it aboard carriers at all, leaving the aircraft effectively beached on shore. By 1957, the Navy's patience had finally run out. A formal analysis, conducted by Vought itself, confirmed the grim numbers. In just 55,000 flight hours, the Cutlass was involved in 78 major accidents. This gave it the worst safety record of any Navy swept-wing fighter. Vice Admiral Harold Martin, the respected air commander of the Pacific Fleet, had seen enough carnage. He ordered the immediate replacement of the Cutlass with the far more reliable Grumman F9 F8 Cougar. The last Cutlass was officially retired from service on March 2, 1959, ending one of the most troubled chapters in the history of naval aviation. The jet that was meant to be the future had barely lasted 5 years in the fleet. The Vought F7U Cutlass is a story of ambition tragically outrunning ability. It was a machine simply too far ahead of its time. It pioneered features that would become standard on later jets: swept wings, afterburners, and missile armament. But it was hampered by immature systems and engines that weren't ready for such a demanding design. Westinghouse failed to deliver the thrust the airframe required, and Vought couldn't engineer solutions for the resulting instability. It was a futuristic, striking airplane. Some pilots even said it was a joy to fly, right up to the moment it revealed its deadly flaws. But its looks and bold promises could never make up for its appalling safety record. The story of the Ensign Eliminator is a brutal reminder of the high price of pushing technology too far, too fast, and a tribute to the incredible bravery of the pilots who strapped into this radical, beautiful, and deadly machine. If you liked this video about one of aviation's most notorious failures, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from military aviation history. And let us know in the comments below, what other infamous aircraft should we cover next? Thanks for watching. Goodbye.